everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We are in the middle of winter. It is a cold water temperature period. And one of the best baits that you can throw during your coldest water temps of the year is a small finesse swim bait. And what I mean by small finesse swim bait is a swim bait that's probably 3.5 inches or less. They can go all the way down to like an inch and a half. They really do get very, very small. But the cool thing with them is they generate a lot of strikes during the cold water period. I mean, they really catch fish year round, and not just bass, but pretty much all game fish. You can catch a lot of the panfish species, you can catch walleye, pike, bass. Everything pretty much eats a small minnow. And from that standpoint, your small finesse swim baits are a great bait to be using to catch both big fish and numbers. So I've got here a bunch of the ones that I like to throw. I'm going to walk you through it, kind of give you a little bit of breakdown as to when I like to choose one versus another. Because I really do think if you have a handful of different swim baits that you use, and this goes for most baits, what you'll find is those 3 or 4 baits will work under almost all the different circumstances you run across, but they're going to be really specific instances where one is better than another. And that can go for your top water baits, that can go for spinner baits, your crank baits. Generally speaking, one size does not work all of the time, or one bait does not work all the time, at least not for me. I really feel like I can hone it in where I've got a couple of different ones that I like to throw, and this is kind of what I have across the board, like I said, for other techniques. But today it's small finesse swim baits. So we're going to talk about these. Overall, I think most people would say that the Kitech Swing Impact Fat is definitely one of the most popular swim baits out there. And I would agree with that. It is a phenomenal swim bait. It's one of my go-tos that I use quite a bit. This is a 2.8 size. I've actually got it here on a Finesse tush, our core tackle tush, which hopefully should be out in early part of next year. Just fits these things so well, but these are really great swim baits. Now, having said that, I honestly think they produce too much action at times. So these have very, very wide tail wag. So they really do move quite a bit. I do like to throw them under circumstances where I've got a little bit of color in the water. So if I've got a little milkiness to it, or I'm fishing even up into what I would consider dirty water, the Swing Impact Fat is going to be the one that I tend to go with a lot because it's got a little bit bulkier body, but more than anything, that tail has really wide action, which produces more vibration, allowing the fish to hone in on the bait. Now, having said that, I don't throw this all of the time. I do have some other ones that I like to throw. So let's say if the water is a lot clear, that's when I like to go with some of the much more tight wobbling baits versus say the Swing Impact Fat. So one of those is another Kitech bait. This is the Easy Shiner, little 3-inch size Easy Shiner. And what you'll find with this bait is a very tight tail kick. So this little tail isn't going like this, like the Swing Impact Fat. It's really just kind of tail kicking, which is a much more natural swimming action. If you see a minnow in the water, you don't see their tail, their whole back end going like this. You see the little tiny flicks of the tail, if that. I mean, it's generally like a couple of flicks and they're gone. So from that standpoint, that's a much more natural bait. So if I'm fishing really clear water, I like the Easy Shiner, and the other one I like is the Versus Shad. This one is the Duo Realis. I was going to show you the package, but I've torn it. But the Versus Shad, it's a 3-inch. And one thing you can tell with both these bodies, very, very narrow, very streamlined. You get the same thing, just real fine, nice, tight tail kick. That's what I'm looking for when I'm fishing clear water. Because again, those fish know your bait's there. If you're fishing water that's, what I consider like extremely clear, which is like 10 feet or more, those fish see those baits coming from a long distance away. In both of those cases, because those baits tend to run very narrow, I like to go with a really small jig head of some form that's like anywhere from a 16th ounce to an 1/8 of an ounce. If I'm throwing something that's got a little bit more body to it, that's when I like to go with our core tackle tush swim bait. And then, so those are going to be more of your traditional jig head type swim baits. I really like to throw little swim baits on drop shots as well. And when I'm doing that, like this guy right here. And one little tip, it's always better to know what I like to say, nose hook the bait like that versus go through it. That will help limit your line twist. It also leads to a much better presentation in the water because it kind of keeps your bait more upright like that. But this is my preferred drop shot bait. This is the Power Swimmer by Berkeley. They're a little 2.8-inch size. And the reason I like this for drop shots is because the material is much tougher. Now it's got a tighter wobble tail kick than say your Swing Impact Fat. Not quite as tight as the Versus Shad or the Easy Shiner. It's kind of a mix, but more than anything, it's the material is tougher. And when you're barely hooking one of these soft little baits, what I tend to find is if I'm throwing, say, a Swing Impact Fat, you catch one fish and you're done. The bait rips off, you're just done. I've gone I've used this bait to cash a lot of checks on say Lake Champlain, and I've gone through like one or two baits all day because they're really a tough material and they stay on there very, very well. So from that standpoint, to me, I like that versus going through 3 packs of one bait. It saves me a lot of money and I feel like the results are every bit as good with this. The other small swim bait that I like is this guy right here. This is the Reaction Innovation Skinny Little Dipper. So it's the small version of their Skinny Dipper. This bait has a lot of tail thump. Now, I tend to like to throw this in 2 situations. One, if I'm looking for a trailer on, say, a swim jig or a small, some of the small micro versions of like the Minimax chatterbait, some of the really small vibrating jigs, it's a very good trailer for that. And it's a tougher material again, so it holds up well. It's got a good streamlined body for it. Just works really well as a trailer. So this is the small swim bait that I like to throw under those circumstances. The other time that I like to fish this is if I'm fishing around some docks or I'm fishing overhanging bushes and I want a bait that I can rig in a traditional Texas rig manner and I want to be able to skip this back into those areas. This bait will hold a small EWG style hook better than some of these other baits. And at the same time, because you have that tougher material, it allows you to skip it without the bait just sliding down the hook. So that's when I'll throw this. It's more of my trailer slash like skipping back into heavy cover bait. I've got my drop shot baits, and then I've got my traditional, more jig head mannered small swim baits. But they are absolute fish catchers. Every one of these baits has a time and place for me. I carry a bunch of them in my boat, and I love small swim baits. I feel like I was very early adapter of the small swim bait world, and I've used it to cash a lot of checks and make a lot of money. And it's just a fun way to fish. You know, most of these baits I'm going to be fishing on spinning gear, except if I'm throwing the Little Dipper. But most of the baits are going to be spinning gear, light line, 10-pound main, braided main line to anywhere from a 6 to a 10-pound leader, depending on water clarity. Pretty straightforward. I fish them, like I said, all in the jig head, but these are the ones I throw. So let me know in the comment section, what are some of your favorite small finesse swim baits? I'd love to see what you have to offer. I'm always trying a bunch. I will say there are a bunch out there that I found that I don't really like as well. Where like just the tail action isn't really there, or they're too small, they just don't seem to run right. I don't know. Maybe I'll do a video on those. I'll let you know which ones I don't like as well. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and stay tuned. New video coming out tomorrow.